This is what the book looks like in the UK export paperback version. And I'm going to start by reading for about 2 minutes from right about the middle of the book. I just like this part a lot, to wake us all up, including me. It's a woman living in the wilds of Tidewater, Virginia, in a swamp. She's run away from her husband, taking her little daughter with her. And right now her daughter is about 15 and she's off at a summer school program. So she finally has a chance to be alone and do what she really wants to do, her real passion in life, which is to become a playwright. And this scene takes place in about 1983. Meg took advantage of Karen's absence to start another play. It was about the commander of a death squad in El Salvador who falls in love with a nun he's supposed to massacre. In the early drafts, they were a man and a woman. They were always in bed by Act 1, Scene 2, because they didn't have much to say to each other. She decided to draft them as lesbians to make them more communicative. Afterward, she could go back and change the Death Squad commander character to be male. But it didn't work. The open-hearted Death Squad commander refused to seem male to her. She rewrote him as a man, pouty and sarcastic. Instantly, the nun became a solicitous bore. He ignored her, and there they were again, back in bed. She tried again, establishing the female character first in scenes with other nuns. Now the Death Squad commander seemed superfluous. She made him win her heart away from the nice nuns by being even nicer, but they were both so unsexy as affectionate chatterboxes, the love story just fell apart. They had to ignore each other completely to get anything done. She tried one last time. She rewrote him as a complete jerk. Instead of falling in love with anybody, the commander said he would kill his own death squad to have sex with the nun. Afterward, the nun went to bed with him to reward him. It was kind of sexy. Meg saw a distinct pattern to it: patriarchy. She had wanted to write about idealized partners, but the impressive men she had known weren't anybody's partner. They were lone wolves and dictatorial heads of families. The idea of partnering with a powerful man, well, it sounds nice enough, but even on paper it won't fly. A novel ends with a wedding for a reason. Partnership is anti-dramatic. Partners are not adversaries. Partners don't fuck. Yet she dreamed of loving a lesbian partner. Was she stupid? Lee, that's her husband, had been sexy to her at one time, but it wasn't because they had a relationship. It was the opposite, because they didn't. And then she stupidly became his partner. She wasted her love on a wolf. What an excellent use of her youth and beauty. She glared at the typewriter, blaming it for her existential angst. She finished the play with the nun sacrificing the other nuns one by one to protect the Death Squad commander from the revenge of his dead Death Squad friends. She tore it into very small pieces and buried it deep in the trash can. Okay. And now I'm going to read, starting at the beginning until someone tells me to stop, because I feel it's not my job to watch the clock. All right. You have your mission. I will self-destruct in 10 minutes, starting now. Okay. Stillwater College sat on the fall line The fall line is a geographic feature of the state of Virginia. It's the eastern 200 miles of the state of Virginia are completely sandy. There's no rock there. There's not one single rock, except a rock that may be washed down. It's almost like it's part of the ocean floor. That's Tidewater, Virginia. It's just sand. And the line is the fall line. Stillwater College sat on the fall line, south of Petersburg. One half of the campus was elevated over the other half, and the waters above were separated from the waters below by a ledge with stone outcroppings. The waters below lay still, and the waters above flowed down. They seeped into the sandy ground before they had time to form a stream, and that's why the house had been named Stillwater. It overlooked a lake that lay so motionless as if it had been dug with shovels and hand-lined with clay. But the lake had been there as long as anyone could remember. It had no visible outlet and no docks because a piling might puncture the layer of clay. I have to say this lake is modeled one-to-one on the lake in Andrei Platonov's novel, The Locks of Epiphan. For anyone who's read it? Any Platonov freaks in the room? Okay. Nobody swam in the lake because of the leeches in the mud. There was no fishing because girls don't fish. The house had been a plantation. After the war between the states, and we know now we're in the South because in the North we call this the Civil War. After the war between the states, it was turned into a school for girls, and after that, a teacher's college, and then in the 1930s, a women's college. In the 1960s, it was a mecca for lesbians, with girls in shorts standing in the reeds to smoke, popping little black leeches with their fingers, risking expulsion for cigarettes and going in the lake. The road from the main highway forked and branched like lightning. You had to know where Stillwater was to find it. Strangers drove to the town of Stillwater, parked their cars, and walked around. They thought a college ought to be impossible to miss in a town that small. But people in Stillwater didn't think you had any business going to the college if you didn't know where it was. It was a dry county, and so small anyway, that most businesses didn't have signs. If you wanted even a haircut, or especially a drink, you had to know where to find it. The biggest sign in the county was for the colored snack bar out on the highway, Bunny Burger. The sign for Stillwater College was nailed to the fence by the last turnoff, where you could already see the outbuildings. The main house faced the lake. The academic buildings and the dorms were behind the main house around a courtyard. All the girls lived on campus. From the loop road, little dirt tracks took off in all directions, leading to the faculty housing where the station wagons sat crooked in potholes under big oak trees. The reason strangers came looking for Stillwater was a famous poet. And as I was telling my publisher, maybe I was telling the Tony Form, famous poet is a very famous phrase because everybody knows there's no such thing. People who are on TV are famous. Poets are never, ever famous. Okay. The reason strangers came looking for Stillwater was a famous poet. He had a job there as an English professor and was so well respected that other famous poets came all the way to Stillwater to read to his classes. Tommy, the smart-ass owner of the white snack bar in town, called them international faggotry, and always asked them if they wanted mayonnaise with their coffee. Peggy Valancourt, that's the main character, was born in 1948 near Port Royal, Virginia, north of Richmond, an only child. Her parents were well off, but lived modestly, devoting their lives to the community. Her father was an Episcopal priest and the chaplain of a girls' boarding school. Her mother was his wife, a challenging full-time job. This was before psychologists and counseling, so if a girl lost her appetite Or a woman felt guilty after a D&C. It's an old kind of abortion. She would come to Mrs. Valancourt, who felt very important as a result. The Reverend Valancourt felt important all the time because he was descended from a family that had sheltered John Wilkes Booth. The Valancourts had a nice brick mansion on campus. Peggy went to the local white public school to avoid a conflict of interest. Her mother had gone to Bryn Mawr, that's where Katharine Hepburn went to school, and regretted not sending Peggy to a better school. Can't you imagine a college that's academically a little more intellectual? She asked Peggy. What about Wellesley? But Peggy wanted to go to Stillwater. It came about like this. Her physical education teacher, Miss Miller, had said something about her gym suit, and Peggy realized she was born and intended to be a man. Gym suits were blue and baggy, but as you got older, they were less baggy and sort of cut into your crotch in a way that was suggestive of something, she didn't know what. Miss Miller had stood in front of her and yanked her gym suit into position, sort of like I have to do with this dress. Okay. Yanked her gym suit into position by pulling down on the legs. She placed her big hands around Peggy's waist and said something to the effect that her gym suit would never fit her right. She had felt close to Miss Miller since the day she fell down in 3rd grade and knocked out a tooth. Miss Miller dragged her to the bathroom to wash the blood off her mouth, and the tooth went down the drain. There goes a nickel from a tooth fairy, Peggy had said. Miss Miller dug into her pocket and produced a quarter. No other adult had ever given her so much money all at one time. The scene was stuck indelibly in the child Peggy's mind. Her allowance was 9 cents, a nickel, and 5 pennies, of which she was required to put 1 in the collection plate. Realizing that her girlhood was a mistake didn't change her life immediately. She could still ride, play tennis, go camping with the Scouts, fish for crappie, shoot turtles with a BB gun. But around age 14, it got more complicated. She informed her best friend, Debbie, that she intended to join the Army out of high school. She knew Debbie from Girl Scout camp. Debbie was from Richmond, a large and diverse city. "You're a thespian," Peggy heard her say. "Get away from me." Debbie picked up her blanket and moved to the other side of the room. Then Peggy's life changed. Debbie had taught her to French kiss and dance, shoeing the mule, knowledge that was supposed to arm them for a shared conquest of debutante balls. And now this, betrayal. Debbie never spoke to her again. Peggy told her mother. "A thespian," her mother said, bemused. "Well, darling, every girl gets crushes." Her mother was from the generation that thought a girl's first love is always a tomboyish older girl. She gave Peggy the novel Cress Delahanty to read. It was counterproductive. "You are not, absolutely not, going to join the Army. Do you hear me? You are going to college. Get this out of your system. You laugh at yourself someday." Her mother suspected her of having a girlfriend already and sent off for brochures about early admission to Radcliffe. She didn't believe in coeducation, but her daughter's plight called for desperate measures. But Peggy didn't have a girlfriend. Once, she accepted an invitation from Miss Miller to a barbecue at the state park. There were only women there, no other girls. She recognized the woman everybody said was the maintenance man at the elementary school. It was indirectly her fault that Peggy thought of man as a job title. They were playing softball and taking it really seriously, hitting the ball so hard you could get hurt. Peggy left the party to play horseshoes with kids from the Baptist church instead and get a ride home on their bus. She began paying more attention to the thespians at school. They were fat girls and nice boys with scarves around their neck under their shirts. She auditioned for a part in Our Town and didn't get it. Afterward, the drama club went to the drugstore for milkshakes, and the director, a senior, explained to her about lesbians. He chuckled and shook his head a lot. Everybody laughed so loud that Peggy felt inconspicuous despite the topic. His voice was almost a whisper. "You and your friend Miss Miller are bull dykes. You should go to dyke bars in Washington or Stillwater College." "Miss Miller is not my friend." After that, word got back to Peggy's mother, and Miss Miller and the maintenance man were fired and moved away.